At our Christmas dinner, my son Michael pointed at me and declared that I was no longer a part of his family. The laughter from his in-laws, Robert and Martha, was immediate and boisterous, as if his words were the punchline to a fantastic joke. My daughter-in-law, Ashley, then raised her glass in a celebratory gesture. Everyone seemed to be waiting for my downfall, and it appeared the moment had finally arrived. I, however, simply smiled and told them to look beneath the table. The item they found there would completely change their lives forever. Michael's words, calling me a burden to everyone, felt like a physical blow. I was sitting in my favorite armchair, and the evening newspaper slipped from my lap to the hardwood floor. My son was standing near the fireplace, using the same finger he used as a child to point at his sister and blame her for his mistakes. The coffee table in front of me was littered with papers. There were glossy brochures showing smiling older people, cost estimates written in Ashley's neat script, and various legal documents that I didn't recognize. I asked what they were talking about, but my voice sounded strange and much quieter than usual. Ashley leaned forward on the couch, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. She explained that they had done their research and found that the Sunset Manor facility had great reviews and was within their budget. The word budget made me grip the worn leather arms of my chair. I wanted to know since when my life was a matter of their budget. She responded that it had been an issue since I lost my job 2 weeks ago and hadn't come up with a plan for my future. Michael started pacing, not meeting my gaze. He told me it was because my wife Linda had passed away and left them to take care of me. The fireplace crackled behind him, and the flickering light created dancing shadows on his face, making him look like a stranger wearing my son's features. I tried to get up, reminding them I was 64, not 94, but my legs felt wobbly. I assured them I could find another job. Ashley's laugh was sharp and cold like a winter wind. She scoffed and told me to be realistic about finding a job in this economy at my age. She then pulled out her phone and started swiping as she talked about my future. The easy, casual cruelty of her actions left me speechless. Michael finally stopped pacing and looked directly at me, telling me that my time had passed and they couldn't continue to carry me. The idea of them carrying me was absurd. For 3 decades, I had worked 60-hour weeks to pay for Michael's college, his wedding, and the down payment on his home. I had even paid for Ashley's parents, Robert and Martha's, medical bills after Robert lost his insurance. Every family crisis, every unexpected cost, had always been my responsibility. Ashley spoke in a businesslike, efficient tone, informing me that the facility accepted new residents on the 1st of every month and that they could arrange for me to move in on December 1st. I felt like they were talking about moving furniture or solving a simple problem, not about my life. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked on steadily, counting the final moments of my life as I knew it. Outside, the November wind rattled the windows of the home I had bought, the same one they now intended to sell. I whispered that I needed time to think, but Michael dismissed me, gathering the brochures into a neat pile. He told me the decision had been made and that they would help me pack the following weekend. They both stood up together like actors at the end of a rehearsed scene. Ashley smoothed her skirt while Michael adjusted his tie. They both avoided looking at me as they walked toward the door. Ashley said she would call me the next day to discuss the arrangements as she left the room. The front door closed with a gentle click. I heard their car start and drive off into the distance. I stayed in my chair, staring at the scattered papers they had left behind. A brochure had fallen face up on the floor near my feet. The cover read, "Sunset Manor, where every day is a new beginning." A smiling elderly man was on the front, but his eyes looked empty, a stark contrast to the life that still remained in mine. My hands shook a little as I reached for the brochure. It was a full 15 minutes before I could even move. The brochure, now a crumpled mess in my fist, felt like a joke. Its cheerful promises were nothing but a mockery. My legs felt like they didn't belong to me as I pushed myself out of the chair and walked down the hallway toward my office. The hardwood floors, which I hadn't noticed in the 30 years I'd lived there, creaked with every step. I walked past all the family photos lining the walls, Michael's graduation, his wedding, and a picture of Ashley, her smile never quite reaching her eyes even then. Each picture felt like a testament to my own foolishness. The door to my office was ajar. As I stepped inside, the comforting smell of paper and leather embraced me like a familiar friend. I turned on the desk lamp, and its yellow light created a small circle on the mahogany surface where I had spent decades planning my family's financial future. The keys to the filing cabinet were on their usual hook. My hands were no longer trembling. I thought I would see what 3 decades of generosity looked like on paper. The metal drawer slid open with a satisfying click. The file folders were neatly organized and labeled in my own handwriting. There were folders for college expenses, house payments, medical bills, and weddings. Each folder represented thousands of dollars that had flowed from my bank account to theirs. I pulled out Michael's college file first. Inside were tuition receipts, room and board statements, and book allowances for his 4 years at Washington State University, and a little extra for the semester he changed majors. My desk calculator came to life as I began to type. The totals for each year, $32,000, $48,000, and $39,000, hit me harder than the last. When I saw the final sum, $168,000, it made me pause. It was more than many people earned in 4 years, and it had been spent on a son who now called me a burden. I then opened the house folder. Inside were records of the down payment, closing costs, and the emergency loan I had given them when Michael lost his first job and couldn't pay his mortgage. Ashley was pregnant at the time, and they had told me they needed stability. I had paid a $60,000 down payment, $15,000 in closing costs, and a $22,000 emergency loan. The wedding folder felt heavier than all the others. It contained catering invoices, flower arrangements, and venue deposits. Ashley had insisted on a memorable wedding, and she got her wish, memorable for the man who had paid for it all. I had paid $18,000 for the venue, $12,000 for catering, and $8,000 for photography. My calculator now showed numbers that would have bought me a comfortable retirement. Instead, they had bought me a one-way ticket to Sunset Manor. But the folder for medical bills was what hurt the most. It contained the costs for Robert and Martha's cancer treatments, heart surgeries, and prescriptions. I had stepped in and paid for everything after their insurance failed, believing that family took care of family. I paid $43,000 for Robert's surgery, $28,000 for Martha's chemotherapy, and $17,000 in prescription costs. The papers were now spread out across my desk, and they felt like accusations. Every receipt, canceled check, and bank statement told the same story, that I, James, was the family's personal ATM. For 15 years, I had written checks without hesitation, believing that investing in my family meant investing in love. I logged into my banking accounts, and my computer screen glowed as the electronic records confirmed what the paper trail had already told me. Over $850,000 had been spent on family expenses. It was enough money to buy 3 homes in Spokane or fund several comfortable retirements. The irony was bitter, they had called me a burden. I had spent decades carrying their burdens while they planned to throw me away like expired medication. In my desk drawer was the business card for Tom Clark, my old college roommate, who had become one of the most respected estate attorneys in Spokane. He had handled my wife, Linda's, will, and had offered to help me again when I recently lost my job. I picked up his card, running my thumb over the embossed letters. I knew Tom would understand the numbers I had spread out before me, and more importantly, he would understand what they meant in legal terms. The clock on my desk showed it was 10:15 at night. It was too late to call him tonight, but I knew that tomorrow would bring a different kind of conversation. We would be discussing financial obligations, family responsibilities, and who owed whom. I leaned back in my chair, surrounded by evidence of my generosity and their greed. The brochure for the nursing home was still forgotten in the living room, but its message, where every day is a new beginning, echoed in my mind. They had no idea how right they were about that. I couldn't sleep that night. By 7 in the morning, I was sitting at my kitchen table with Tom's business card in hand. The coffee in my mug grew cold as I rehearsed what I would say. I finally called him at 8:30, and his secretary scheduled me for a 2 o'clock appointment. The drive downtown took about 25 minutes through the gray November drizzle. Tom's law firm was located on the 15th floor of the Polsun building, where the brass nameplates gleamed against the dark wood paneling. My briefcase felt like a shield, filled with 3 decades of financial records. I told the receptionist I was James, there to see Tom Clark. She was professional and efficient, and within minutes, Tom appeared. His hair was grayer than I remembered, but his handshake was as firm as ever. He welcomed me into his office, which overlooked the Spokane River through its floor-to-ceiling windows. The gray November sky framed the view. The walls were lined with legal volumes, diplomas, and certificates, a testament to his professional success. I sat down in the leather client chair, opening my briefcase with a precise click. I asked Tom to be honest with me and tell me what my legal options were. He raised an eyebrow and leaned back, explaining that it would depend on what had happened and that I should start from the beginning. I told him that my family wanted to put me in a nursing home. The word sounded clinical, empty of all the emotion I was feeling. They had made this decision without even talking to me, after I had financially supported them for decades. I then spread all the documents across his mahogany desk: bank statements, tuition receipts, mortgage payments, and medical bills. As he looked at each paper, his expression changed from one of curiosity to one of concern. I pointed to the first stack of papers and said that Michael's college education alone cost $168,000. I then pointed to the house down payment and emergency loans, $97,000, and Ashley's parents' medical expenses, $88,000. I continued listing other expenses, including wedding costs, car payments, and insurance premiums. Tom's voice had become sharp and focused with professional interest as he asked me for the total. I told him it was $857,000. He whistled softly and put down the calculator, telling me that the law was on my side. For the first time in 2 days, I felt a spark of hope. I asked him to explain. Tom pulled a legal pad from a drawer and clicked his pen with practiced efficiency. He explained that I wasn't legally obligated to provide any of that financial support and that every dollar was a voluntary act of generosity. This meant that I could pursue a financial recovery if I could prove financial exploitation. He gestured to the documents, telling me that I had enough evidence to make any attorney happy. My hands finally stopped shaking completely for the first time since my family's confrontation. I asked him about the process. He explained that we would start with formal demand letters notifying them that I expected to be reimbursed for the non-obligatory financial support I had provided over the years. Tom's pen moved quickly across his legal pad as he wrote. He said that if they refused, which they probably would, we would then file a civil action for financial recovery. The timeline would be about 3 to 6 months, depending on how they responded. He leaned forward, his expression serious, telling me that we also needed to consider my current financial situation. I nodded, understanding what he meant. I told him I had enough savings to live independently for at least 2 years, maybe even 3 if I was careful. He said that was good because it would strengthen my position considerably. He then turned to a new page in his legal pad. He said that for the documentation we would need, he recommended that I meet with someone who could provide a detailed financial analysis, Sarah Miller at Spokane Community Bank, who specialized in financial recovery cases. He scribbled her contact information on his business card, telling me that she could create a comprehensive report showing the pattern of financial support, and that courts loved clear numbers and professional analysis. I asked when I should contact her. He told me to call her the next morning, and that he would call ahead to let her know I was coming. Tom gathered all the documents into neat piles. He told me he wanted me to understand that this wasn't about revenge, but about justice. The word justice resonated with new possibilities I had never considered. We shook hands at his office door. My briefcase now contained copies of his notes and Sarah Miller's contact information. I took the elevator down, and as it descended, I felt like I was being carried toward a future I was finally ready to fight for. Outside, the November drizzle had stopped, and Spokane's downtown streets were gleaming with reflected light. For the first time in days, I looked at my reflection in a building's glass doors and saw a man with a plan. I reviewed Tom's notes until midnight, committing every detail of my guarantor rights to memory. The next morning at 9 o'clock sharp, I called Sarah Miller. Her voice had the same professional warmth I remembered from our years working together. She said that Tom had mentioned I might need some assistance with banking. By 10 o'clock, I was sitting across from her at her desk in the main branch of Spokane Community Bank. The familiar hum of financial activity surrounded us. Her office overlooked the lobby where customers were oblivious to the strategic intelligence gathering taking place. I told Sarah I needed information about all the loans for which I was a guarantor. She nodded, her fingers moving across the keyboard with practiced efficiency. She said that Tom had explained the situation and that she was pulling up my guarantee obligations. Her computer screen reflected in her glasses as she navigated the secure banking systems. With every click, new revelations about financial entanglements that I had forgotten or never fully understood came to light. She said that she had pulled up the information and adjusted the monitor so I could see it. She told me I was the primary guarantor on 4 active accounts. I was surprised. I had only expected 2, maybe 3. Sarah then told me that Michael's vehicle loan had a current balance of $47,200. Her voice remained neutral as she read the numbers that represented years of my financial security. She pointed out that there had been 3 late payments in the past 6 months. I asked her what would happen if he defaulted. She said that as the guarantor, I would become immediately responsible for the full balance, plus any accrued interest and fees. She printed the loan summary, and the pages came out of her printer like evidence in a criminal trial. She then told me that the mortgage on their house had a remaining balance of $283,000. My breath caught in my throat. I had co-signed for nearly $300,000 on an original loan for $350,000. She hesitated, looking at another screen, and said that they had made their payments, but there was also a home equity line of credit for $60,000, which was currently maxed out. I said that it would be complicated, but possible, before I could stop myself. She raised an eyebrow. I quickly apologized, saying I was thinking out loud. I took another printed summary from her, still warm from the machine, and asked what else. Sarah then told me that Ashley also had a personal credit line with them with a $25,000 limit and a current balance of $24,800. Her tone was more cautious as she told me that for the past year, they had only been making the minimum payments. The numbers were piling up like storm clouds, and every figure represented my potential financial obligation, money I would legally be required to pay if my family continued their pattern of financial irresponsibility. Sarah quickly clicked on her calculator and told me that my total exposure was $415,200 in active guarantees. It was almost $500,000 hanging over my head like a sword, held by the same people who wanted to put me in a nursing home. I asked Sarah what my options were as a guarantor. She leaned back in her chair, choosing her words carefully. She told me that legally I could demand full payment at any time if I believed the borrowers were financially unstable. I could also request to be removed as a guarantor, but that would require both the lender's approval and the borrower's agreement. And if they refused, I would remain liable until the loans were completely paid off. Sarah gathered the documents into a neat folder and asked what had prompted my inquiry. I told her to just call it risk management. Her banker's instincts immediately recognized my strategic financial planning. She told me that if I was concerned about my financial exposure, I should get a comprehensive financial profile on everyone involved. I asked her how I would do that, and she said I would need to hire a private financial investigator. She wrote David Brooks's contact information on her business card, telling me that he specialized in family financial assessments for legal purposes and that he was thorough and discreet and that his reports held up in court. David Brooks. He was another piece in the growing puzzle of my family's financial vulnerabilities. I stood, shaking Sarah's hand while carefully organizing the loan summaries in my briefcase. I now had over $400,000 in financial leverage, all documented by a major financial institution and a banking professional who could testify to my guarantor status. I thanked Sarah, telling her the meeting had been extremely illuminating. She wished me luck and said that no matter what I was planning, those numbers gave me considerable legal standing. As I stepped outside, the November air was sharp against my face. I finally understood that my family's financial dependence had grown far beyond my past generosity. They weren't just ungrateful for my past support, they were currently in debt, and their financial stability depended on my continued cooperation. David Brooks's business card in my pocket felt significant as I walked to my car. The investigation was no longer about simple revenge, it was about gathering comprehensive financial intelligence. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Michael, telling me that they needed to talk about the next steps for my move. I deleted the message without responding, letting them wonder about my silence while I gathered more ammunition. David said he would use public observation, social media monitoring, and documentation of their spending habits to gather information. He then asked if I was sure I wanted to know all of it. His question carried more weight than just the words he spoke. I knew that by hiring someone to watch my family, I was crossing a line, and I could no longer pretend this was about justice, it was now about revenge. I told him I was certain. David told me that a comprehensive report would take 2 to 3 weeks to complete. He explained that I should provide him with their addresses, work schedules, and vehicle information. I watched his pen move steadily across his notepad as he told me the cost would be $40 an hour, plus expenses, with an estimated total of $3,000 for the complete surveillance. I thought about how that was less than what I had spent on Michael's senior year textbooks alone. I then asked David about the legal admissibility of the information he would gather. He assured me that everything he collected would follow strict protocols for use in court, including photos, videos, and detailed logs with timestamps. He then pulled a standard contract from his desk drawer, promising to maintain complete confidentiality and to operate within all legal boundaries. I read through the contract carefully, paying close attention to the terms and conditions because of my financial background. I saw that it guaranteed professional investigation services and legal compliance, and that the evidence would be suitable for family court proceedings. As I was signing the agreement, David asked me one last question, if I was prepared for what he might find, as families sometimes have secrets that went beyond just their spending habits. I told him that after 40 years in financial services, very little surprised me. David gave me a grim smile and placed the signed contract in a folder with my name on it. He said he would begin the surveillance the next morning and that I could expect a preliminary report within 1 week. We shook hands, and the deal was done. I left his office with a receipt for my retainer and the knowledge that a professional would soon be documenting every financial misstep my family took. On the drive home, I passed the restaurant where Ashley had insisted we celebrate her birthday the previous year, a meal I had paid for as usual. Soon, I thought, I would know exactly how often they ate at such places using money that should have secured my own future. My phone vibrated again. Michael had sent me another text, asking me to call them back because they needed to discuss the timeline. I turned my phone off without reading anything else, letting them wonder about my silence while David Brooks gathered evidence of their financial irresponsibility. The 7 days I had to wait had tested my patience, but the preliminary reports David sent me were worth every dollar of his retainer. Each night's briefing revealed new evidence of my family's financial recklessness, expensive restaurants, designer shopping, and luxury services that they paid for while claiming to be poor. That night, I decided to see for myself. I drove to Maple Heights Drive, which was a perfect example of suburban prosperity. Michael and Ashley's house was at the end of the cul-de-sac. Its perfectly manicured lawn and beautiful architectural details announced success to everyone who drove by. Their success, I knew, was funded by my guarantees and sacrifices. I parked across the street and positioned my car so the streetlights wouldn't shine on it. Looking through my binoculars, I watched their lifestyle unfold like evidence in a criminal trial. I saw Michael's BMW gleaming in the driveway, the $47,000 loan I had guaranteed. Next to it was Ashley's Mercedes SUV, another financial obligation that had my signature on it. Together, those two vehicles represented nearly $80,000 in debt secured by my creditworthiness. My phone vibrated. It was David, checking in on schedule. He said that he had comprehensive documentation from the week and asked if I was ready for the full report. I responded that I was sitting outside their house at that very moment. My admission felt like I was crossing another line in my transformation from a victim to a strategist. David said my timing was interesting, as they had just had dinner delivered from Cascadia, a $150 per person restaurant, and it was the third time that week. I watched through their windows as they unpacked elegant containers and poured wine from bottles that probably cost more than some families' weekly grocery bills. The casual way Ashley arranged the gourmet containers showed that she was a person accustomed to luxury. I asked what else he had documented. He listed a 3-hour shopping trip to Nordstrom on Tuesday that resulted in multiple bags, a $240 spa day for Ashley on Wednesday, and an $1,800 golf set for Michael on Thursday. David's voice was professionally detached, but I could hear the judgment in his tone. He then listed a $400 couples massage at a resort spa on Friday. Every single item hit me like a physical blow. While they were planning to put me in a nursing home, they were spending my guaranteed money on luxuries that I hadn't enjoyed in years. I asked David how all of this compared to their reported income. He said that Michael's salary was only enough to cover basic living expenses and maybe some modest entertainment. Everything else, their house, their cars, and their entire lifestyle, was completely dependent on external financing. I could hear papers rustling on the other end of the line as he told me that without my guarantees, they would only be able to afford a small apartment and used cars. I watched as a contractor's truck pulled into their driveway. Two men started to unload and assemble an expensive outdoor dining set that looked Italian, expensive, and completely unnecessary for the November weather in Spokane. I told David that they were installing new patio furniture right now. He told me that it was part of their outdoor kitchen expansion, which had started on Monday, and the estimated cost was $12,000. He said that his documentation had captured everything that was charged to the home equity line that I had guaranteed. $12,000 for outdoor cooking equipment they would only use 3 months out of the year. The absurdity of their priorities completely solidified my resolve. David said that the legal documentation was solid, with photographs, receipts, spending patterns, and a lifestyle analysis compared to their income, all of which was admissible in family court. He then paused and told me that their level of financial irresponsibility, while they were planning to put me in a nursing home, would create a very strong case for fund recovery. I looked through their windows and saw Michael and Ashley laughing at something on their oversized television, probably another expensive entertainment system purchased with borrowed money. Their casual happiness while they were planning my exile felt like betrayal in its purest form. I told David to send me everything the next morning because I was ready to move forward. He said that the complete file would be in my email by 9 a.m. And that no matter what I was planning, I had substantial legal grounds. The call ended as the contractors finished their installation. Michael came outside to inspect their work, nodding his approval at another luxury that had been bought with my financial backing. He looked satisfied and successful, completely unaware that his lifestyle was about to face a reckoning. I started my car and drove away from their suburban paradise, leaving them to enjoy their expensive dinner and new patio furniture. I knew that tomorrow would bring a different kind of conversation, one about wills, beneficiaries, and the legal consequences of financial exploitation. My phone showed 3 unread messages from Michael about finalizing the arrangements for my move. I deleted the message without reading, my decision now solidified by everything I had just seen. I wanted them to enjoy their final weeks of luxury. 2 days of careful preparation had led me to this moment. I had scheduled an appointment, organized all my evidence, and mentally rehearsed every step of what would be an irreversible legal action. The drive downtown felt different this time, final and decisive, like I was crossing a bridge that I could never go back across. The notary office of Patricia Henderson was on the ground floor of the Courthouse Plaza building. Its professional atmosphere reflected decades of serious legal work, including estate planning, debt documentation, and family disputes. She had witnessed it all with the neutral efficiency her profession demanded. Patricia greeted me and told me to come in, saying she understood I needed a comprehensive revision of my documents. Patricia's desk was laid out with the tools of legal precision, including computer terminals, official seals, and witness forms all arranged with methodical care. She gave me an immediate and professional assessment, confirming my mental capacity, legal understanding, and decision-making abilities. I told her I wanted to completely revise my will and prepare formal debt recovery documents. I opened my briefcase, revealing the surveillance evidence that David had compiled. I told her my family had been financially irresponsible while they were planning to put me in a nursing home. She examined David's reports with practiced neutrality, noting spending patterns and documentation of their lifestyle without any emotional reaction. She said that the documents appeared to be professionally compiled and asked if I was seeking to completely change my beneficiaries. I told her that I wanted every dollar back, which she said was my right. She then pulled standard forms from her filing system, her fingers moving across the keyboard with the efficiency of someone who had handled countless family disputes. Legal language appeared on her screen, covering the revisions of my last will and testament, documentation for debt demands, and protocols for asset protection. She then confirmed that the current beneficiaries were my son, Michael, my daughter-in-law, Ashley, and Ashley's parents, Robert and Martha. As she said each name, it felt like I was removing a weight I had carried for decades. I told her that I wanted all family members completely excluded from my inheritance. She said she understood. She asked who I would prefer as my new beneficiaries. I told her the Spokane Humane Society and the United Way, organizations that wouldn't betray my trust or exploit my generosity. I wanted 50% for each. Patricia's typing continued steadily, turning my decisions into legal language that would withstand any court challenges. She then said that regarding the debt recovery documents, she understood I had mentioned guaranteed loans. I told her I had $410,000 in active guarantees, including car loans, a mortgage, and credit lines. I then gave her Sarah's banking summaries, each figure a reminder of my financial vulnerability. I told her that I wanted a formal demand for complete repayment within 30 days and that the documents would require a certified delivery to ensure legal compliance. Patricia reviewed all the loan details thoroughly and professionally. She then asked if I was prepared for any potential family resistance or legal challenges. I told her that I had comprehensive evidence of their financial irresponsibility and that I also had an attorney. The document preparation took 90 minutes of precise legal work. Every revision, exclusion, and demand was carefully crafted to withstand any scrutiny. Patricia maintained her professional detachment as I systematically destroyed 30 years of financial relationships with my family. I read through each document, giving it the full attention my financial background demanded. The will excluded every family member with clinical precision, and the debt demands had clear timelines and legal consequences. The asset protection protocols would prevent any future family claims against my estate. Patricia told me that the documents would give me maximum legal protection and recovery options. She then arranged the papers for signing, and her witnesses were already standing by. She told me that the 30-day notice period would begin upon certified delivery. My signature felt definitive on each page, transforming 3 decades of financial sacrifice into legal weapons against the very people who had planned to put me in a nursing home. The official seal was pressed into the documents with a satisfying finality. Patricia gave me copies for my own records and said the originals would be filed legally. She then organized the completed documents with professional efficiency, telling me that the debt demands would be sent out via certified mail that very day. I left her office carrying the legal documentation that would transform my family's comfortable assumptions into a financial emergency. The 30-day countdown had begun, but they wouldn't know it until the next day's mail delivery. Outside, the Spokane November sky looked clearer than it had in weeks. Soon, I knew, Michael and Ashley would find out that their luxurious lifestyle had an expiration date. 2 days of legal processing had brought me to an appointment at the credit headquarters of Spokane Community Bank that afternoon. I sat in a conference room with 3 senior loan officers, and my notarized documents were spread across their mahogany table like weapons for a carefully planned assault. Margaret Stevens, the senior credit manager, reviewed each document with professional resignation, telling me that the guarantor demand letters appeared to be in perfect legal order. She then said that I was requesting an immediate acceleration on all 4 guaranteed loans, meaning they had to be repaid within 30 days. The loan officers exchanged glances that spoke volumes about what they knew and what I was about to unleash. Michael and Ashley's financial house of cards was about to fall apart, and the banking system would be my enforcement mechanism. The mortgage alone is $283,000. Stevens pulled up their account on her computer screen. The numbers that represented my family's lifestyle were displayed on the screen in stark digital reality, combined with the vehicle loans and credit lines. I told her the exact figure I had memorized, $410,200, which was due in full within 30 days of legal notification. Stevens typed rapidly, updating the loan statuses from current to accelerated. Each keystroke sealed my family's financial fate. She then said she hoped I understood that the borrowers had no realistic way to repay the amounts. I told her that was their problem to solve. The other managers prepared official notification documents while Stevens completed the computer entries. Every keystroke transformed their comfortable monthly payments into impossible lump sum demands that would destroy my family's carefully constructed facade. Margaret then organized the papers with practiced efficiency, telling me that a legal service would deliver the documents within 2 hours and that the 30-day notice period would begin upon receipt. I left the bank at 4 o'clock, driving home through Spokane's afternoon traffic with the satisfaction of someone who had just triggered a financial avalanche. I knew that by 6 o'clock, a legal courier would knock on Michael and Ashley's door with documents that would shatter their world. The phone rang as I pulled into my driveway. Michael's name appeared on the screen, but I let it go to voicemail. Then Ashley called, and then Michael again. The frantic pattern had begun. When I got inside, I poured myself a glass of wine and waited. I knew the courier would have reached their house by now, and they would be reading the demand letters with growing horror. They had 30 days to repay over $400,000 or face foreclosure, repossession, and financial ruin. My phone vibrated with a text from Ashley. She said they needed to talk immediately and that there had been some kind of mistake. There was no mistake. It was 30 years of careful financial planning systematically carried out through the legal system they had never bothered to understand. Another call came from Michael, which I again let go to voicemail. Then I received a text from him, begging me to call them back and saying it was urgent. I knew the urgency was now entirely one-sided. For weeks, I had been the one trying to get them to communicate, cooperate, and show me respect. Now they needed me, and I was in complete control of our relationship. A third phone call came, and this time it lasted until the voicemail cut them off. I could only imagine their panic, their desperate calculations, and their growing realization that the comfortable lifestyle I had paid for was about to disappear. The wine I was drinking tasted better than any I had had in years. The doorbell rang at 7:30. I looked out the window and saw Michael's BMW in my driveway, the same luxury vehicle whose loan I had just recalled. I didn't answer the door. I heard Michael's voice, tinged with a panic I had never heard before, pleading with me, saying we needed to talk. I then heard Ashley's voice join his, saying that this was crazy and that they couldn't possibly do what was being asked of them. She then begged me to open the door and said that we could work it out. I finished my wine and moved to the back of the house, away from their desperate pleas. I wanted them to stand on my doorstep, begging for the mercy they had never shown me. I wanted them to feel the helplessness I had felt when they were planning to put me in a nursing home. The doorbell continued to ring every few minutes for about 20 minutes before their car finally drove away. My phone showed 15 missed calls and 12 unread text messages. I knew that tomorrow would bring a different kind of conversation, one where I had every advantage and they had none. The drive home from the bank had been triumphant, but the real satisfaction came from what I knew was waiting. 3 hours had passed since the legal service delivered those devastating documents to Michael and Ashley's doorstep. And my phone had been ringing almost continuously for the past hour. I settled into my favorite armchair with a bourbon, letting the sixth call go to voicemail. Michael's name appeared repeatedly on the caller ID, each attempt more desperate than the last. The power dynamic that had governed our relationship for 30 years had completely reversed in a single afternoon. On the 7th attempt, I answered, "Dad, thank goodness you picked up." Michael's voice carried a panic I'd never heard before. "There's been some terrible mistake with the bank. They're saying we owe $400,000 immediately." "No mistake." The silence stretched for several seconds as he processed my calm response. But this is impossible. The payments are current. We've never missed. I called the loans due. All of them." "You what?" Ashley's voice joined the call, shrill with disbelief. "James, you can't do this. We have contracts. Read the fine print. Guarantor can demand immediate repayment at any time." Another silence filled with the sound of rustling papers as they frantically searched their loan documents for escape clauses that didn't exist. "Dad, we were wrong. Forgive us." Michael's voice cracked. "The nursing home thing. We were stressed. We didn't mean yes, you were wrong, but it's too late. Please." Ashley had taken the phone, her composure completely shattered. "We can work this out. We'll forget about the nursing home. You can live with us." The irony was exquisite. 2 weeks ago, they'd planned to warehouse me against my will. Now, they wanted me to rescue them from the consequences of their financial irresponsibility. "You called me a burden. We were wrong. We were so wrong." Michael was back on the line, his voice breaking with desperate emotion. "You're not a burden. You're our family. We love you." Love. The word they've never used during 30 years of taking my money. "James, please." Ashley's voice dissolved into tears. "We'll lose everything. The house, the cars, everything we've worked for. Everything I worked for." The phone went quiet except for Ashley's muffled sobbing. I could hear Michael whispering frantically in the background, probably calculating their impossible situation. Their monthly income couldn't cover $400,000 in 400 years, let alone 30 days. "Dad, there has to be something we can do." Michael's voice had become smaller, quieter. The voice of a child seeking mercy from a parent. "Some arrangement, some payment plan. The legal documents are final. But we're family." Ashley had grabbed the phone again. "You can't destroy your own family. You destroyed this family when you decided I was disposable." The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, cycling through denial, bargaining, anger, and back to desperate pleading. They offered everything they'd previously withheld: respect, inclusion, even moving me into their house as an honored guest rather than unwanted burden. Each offer meant the same cold response. "Too late. Think about Christmas dinner next week," Michael said finally, grasping at emotional straws. "Ashley's parents will be there. My cousins, everyone. We can announce that you're moving in with us instead of the other thing. Christmas dinner, how perfect. I'll be there." Relief flooded Michael's voice. "So, you'll work something out. You'll call off the loans. I'll be there for dinner. The loans stand." I hung up while they were still protesting, still pleading, still offering concessions that would have prevented this entire situation if they'd been genuine 2 weeks ago. The bourbon tasted like victory. Next week's Christmas dinner would provide the perfect audience for the final act of this carefully orchestrated drama. Let their extended family witness the consequences of betraying the man who'd supported them for 3 decades. My phone rang again. This time I didn't answer. 25 days had passed since my family's desperate phone calls, and tonight's Christmas Eve dinner would be my final performance. I arrived at Michael and Ashley's house carrying a leather portfolio that contained the culmination of 30 years of careful documentation. The dining room sparkled with holiday decorations that couldn't mask the underlying tension. Ashley's parents, Robert and Martha, sat beside Michael's cousin, Jenny, and her husband. Everyone exchanged pleasantries while avoiding the obvious question. Why had James Collins suddenly agreed to join them after weeks of silence? "Dad, thank you for coming." Michael's voice carried forced warmth as he carved the ham. "This means everything to us." I smiled and said nothing, positioning my portfolio discreetly beside my chair. Conversation flowed around safe topics. Weather, holiday plans, Jenny's new job, while Ashley and Michael exchanged meaningful glances. They'd planned something, coordinated their approach for maximum social pressure. I could feel it building like storm clouds. "James, the grandchildren were asking about you," Martha offered hopefully. "They missed their grandfather." How thoughtful. Halfway through dinner, Michael sat down his fork with theatrical precision. The table's attention focused on him as he cleared his throat. "Everyone, Ashley and I have an announcement." He looked around the table, ensuring maximum audience engagement. "We want you all to witness this. Here it comes. Dad, we've tried everything. Phone calls, letters, begging for mercy." Michael's voice grew louder, more performative, "But you've chosen money over family. You've chosen cruelty over forgiveness." Ashley joined the attack, her voice shaking with practiced emotion. "For 30 years, we've loved you, respected you, included you in everything. And now, when we need understanding most, you've turned your back on us." The guests shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to intervene or witness this family destruction. "So, we want everyone here to know," Michael stood, pointing across the table like a prosecutor delivering final judgment. "You are no longer my family." Finally, Ashley added, her voice breaking with strategic tears. The table fell into shocked silence. Robert and Martha looked mortified. Jenny stared at her plate, wishing she were anywhere else. I folded my napkin calmly and smiled. "How interesting. That's all you have to say?" Michael's face re-eamed. "We're cutting you out of our lives forever. Look under the table." The confusion was immediate. Everyone leaned forward, trying to understand my calm response to their dramatic disownment. I reached down and retrieved my portfolio, placing it on the table beside the Christmas centerpiece. "Since we're making announcements, I have a few documents that might interest everyone." I opened the portfolio methodically, extracting papers organized in perfect order. First, my new will executed last month. I placed it where everyone could see. Michael and Ashley have been removed as beneficiaries. Everything goes to charity. Martha gasped. Robert's face went pale. Second, banking documents showing that I call due all loans I guaranteed for this family. I spread the foreclosure notices like playing cards. $410,000 due 5 days ago. You can't do this. Ashley shrieked, her performance dissolving into genuine panic. Third, surveillance evidence of how they spent money while claiming poverty. David's photographs landed on the table. Expensive restaurants, luxury shopping, spa treatments, all documented while they planned to put me in a nursing home. Jenny picked up one of the photos, her expression shifting from confusion to disgust. You were eating at Cascadia 3 times a week. The mortgage company begins foreclosure proceedings tomorrow, I continued, consulting my timeline. Vehicle repossession starts Tuesday. Credit accounts close Wednesday. The silence stretched until Robert finally spoke. Michael, is this true? He's destroying us. Michael's composure cracked completely. Our own father is destroying his family. Your own father. I corrected quietly. Whom you called a burden and tried to institutionalize. I gathered the documents back into my portfolio while the table absorbed the full scope of what they had witnessed. Michael and Ashley sat in devastated silence, their public humiliation complete. "Merry Christmas, everyone." Jenny picked up the will first, her face growing pale as she read the legal language that excluded Michael and Ashley from my estate entirely. "James, this says everything goes to charity." "Correct." Robert reached for the bank documents, his weathered hands trembling as he examined the foreclosure notices. "Michael, these papers show you owe over $400,000 immediately. We can't pay that." Ashley's voice cracked. "Nobody could pay that." Martha held one of David's surveillance photographs. Michael and Ashley dining at an expensive restaurant while I sat alone in my house planning their nursing home placement. "You were eating out every night while discussing putting your father away." "It's not what it looks like," Michael started weakly. "What does this mean?" Jenny asked, pointing to the debt acceleration clause. "It means the game is over." I explained with clinical precision how guarantor rights worked, how 30 years of supporting their lifestyle had given me complete financial control over their future. Each document told part of the story: the college tuition I'd paid, the house down payment, the endless stream of money flowing from my accounts to fund their comfortable existence. $857,000, I said quietly. That's what I gave them over 3 decades, plus another $400,000 in guaranteed debts. The room fell silent except for Ashley's quiet sobbing. "And they wanted to put you in a nursing home." Robert's voice carried disbelief and growing anger. "They called me a burden, said my time had passed." I gestured toward the documents scattered across the Christmas dinner table while living in a house I helped purchase, driving cars I guaranteed, enjoying a lifestyle my money made possible. Jenny examined the surveillance evidence with growing disgust. "These receipts show hundreds of dollars spent on single meals." While planning Dad's institutionalization, Michael added bitterly, his voice flat with defeat. "We've lost everything." Ashley looked up from the foreclosure notices, mascara streaking down her cheeks. 5 days, I confirmed. "The mortgage company begins proceedings Tuesday. Vehicle repossession follows Wednesday." Martha set down a bank statement showing their maxed-out credit lines. "How could you live like this while planning to abandon the man who supported you?" Michael had no answer. His carefully constructed world of borrowed luxury was collapsing in real time before witnesses who would never view him the same way again. The surveillance shows spa treatments, golf equipment purchases, outdoor kitchen installations, I continued methodically, all charged to credit lines, I guaranteed, while they researched nursing homes for the inconvenient father. Robert studied the legal documents with the attention of someone trying to understand how his daughter had participated in such calculated betrayal. "Ashley, how could you support this?" We thought he'd be happier there," she whispered. "Happier or just out of your way?" The question hung in the air like smoke from extinguished Christmas candles. Jenny gathered the papers into neat stacks, her expression shifting from confusion to understanding to disgust. "James, I had no idea. None of us knew how much you'd sacrificed. They made sure of that." Michael stared at his empty plate, his public humiliation complete. The man who'd pointed across this same table 40 minutes ago, declaring me no longer family, now sat broken by the weight of 30 years of documented ingratitude. "What happens now?" Martha asked quietly. "Now they face the consequences of their choices." I stood and retrieved my portfolio, sliding the damning documents back into their organized sections. "The legal system will handle the rest." The Christmas dinner that had begun with their attempted public shaming of me was ending with their complete exposure and destruction. Every guest now understood exactly who had betrayed whom and why justice had finally arrived at their door. I moved toward the front entrance, leaving them to process the wreckage of their carefully constructed lies. 1 month had passed since Christmas dinner, and my new apartment overlooked Spokane's riverfront park instead of the neighborhood where I had spent 30 years funding someone else's dreams. The moving boxes were finally unpacked, and my modest living room felt more like home than that house ever had. Morning coffee tasted better when nobody expected me to pay for their mistakes. The phone rang at 10:30. Tom's name appearing on the caller ID. Our monthly check-ins had become routine since the legal proceedings concluded. "James, how are you settling in?" "Better every day." I sat down my coffee cup and settled into the comfortable armchair I'd bought without asking anyone's permission. "The view here is spectacular." "Good to hear. I'm calling with the final report on your case." Papers rustled through the phone connection. All foreclosure proceedings completed successfully. The house sold last week. And Michael and Ashley moved to a 2-bedroom apartment near the airport. Michael's working at a car dealership now. Commission only. Ashley took a job at a retail store. Tom's voice carried professional satisfaction. No more spa treatments or expensive restaurants. Learning to live within their means. Exactly what they should have been doing all along. Through my window, I watched joggers following the park's trails. People choosing healthy activities instead of expecting others to fund their entertainment. Simple pleasures that cost nothing but provided genuine satisfaction. Any legal challenges to the will or debt recovery? None. Your documentation was too thorough for any attorney to contest. Tom paused and I could hear him smiling. The surveillance evidence alone would have convinced any judge that justice was served rather than revenge. Justice. The word still resonated with perfect accuracy. What about the inheritance beneficiaries? Spokane Humane Society and United Way both received their documentation. They're planning recognition ceremonies next month. If you're interested in attending, I might do that. Recognition for 3 decades of sacrifice finally directed toward recipients who would appreciate rather than exploit generosity. Organizations that helped others instead of helping themselves to my bank account. James, I have to ask, any regrets about how everything unfolded? I considered the question while watching a family teaching their young daughter to ride a bicycle in the park below. Patient instruction, encouraging words, celebration of small victories, the kind of family dynamics I'd hoped to build but never received. None whatsoever. Not even about the family separation. Tom, they separated from me the moment they decided I was disposable. I simply made that separation legally binding. The conversation continued for another 15 minutes covering final paperwork and account transfers. When we finished, I remained by the window, reflecting on the transformation from victim to victor that had begun 40 days ago in that same living room where they'd announced my expendability. My phone showed no missed calls, no desperate messages, no family emergencies requiring my financial intervention. For the first time in 30 years, my resources belonged entirely to me, available for my own comfort and charitable giving that would be appreciated rather than expected. The afternoon stretched ahead with possibilities. A walk through the park, lunch at a restaurant I'd choose without considering anyone else's preferences. Perhaps a visit to the library where I could read without interruption. Simple pleasures that felt revolutionary. After decades of family servitude, outside my window, the Spokane River flowed steadily eastward, carrying away winter debris and making room for spring's new growth. Change was natural, necessary, and ultimately beneficial for everyone willing to adapt to reality. I raised my coffee cup in a quiet toast to the reflection in the window. A man who'd finally learned that family loyalty should flow both ways, and that dignity was worth more than peace purchased through endless sacrifice. The future looked remarkably bright.